Hello and welcome back to Mastering Minimalist Design. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the basics of what minimalist design is. We'll talk about a few basic guidelines to keep in mind when you're creating your own minimalist designs as we walk through a few examples. Now, at its core, minimalist design is just what it sounds like. It's design that's basically kept to a minimum. When you're dealing with web design in particular, a minimalist design is a design that doesn't have a bunch of graphical bells and whistles on it, that doesn't have all of the gradients and drop shadows and shiny reflections and things like that that really tend to clutter some websites up. And one of the main goals of a minimalist design is to bring the attention to your content. Now, no matter what type of design you're creating, whether it's minimalist or not, your content is important. If you neglect your content, then people are not going to come back to your site. But with minimalist design in particular, you're really trying to reduce all of the clutter so that all of your users' attention is focused on the content. So in order to create an effective minimalist design, you need to make sure first that you have nice, strong content that you can support. And one of the best ways to really understand what minimalist design is just to take a look at some examples. So I'm going to jump into Chrome here. And the first example I have here is intentionally an extreme example. If this was all we were going to be creating in Photoshop for the entire course, then you'd probably be a little bit disappointed in the course itself. Not that this is a bad design, but obviously we want to learn something a little bit more than just putting text within a Photoshop file. But anyways, this is just an extreme example of a minimalist site. All we have here is a few lines of text. We have a title, which is the name of the artist, what he does, he's an artist designer, and then a number of links to basically all of his social media pages. And that's the entire site. That's all there is. And the idea on a design like this is you really want to just bring the attention to what this person does and give them links immediately to examples of this person's artwork. So we have a Twitter page where he's probably talking about his artwork. We have Tumblr, Pinterest, Flickr, things like that where he's probably posting examples of his artwork. And then other sites like Facebook and LinkedIn where you can actually get in touch with him if you're interested in that artwork. So again, this is an extreme example. Most minimalist sites do have a little bit more to it than just a couple of links. And so let's go ahead and move on to the next site, which is the home site of Nicola Potts, who is an executive coach. And as we can see here, this site is also focused mainly on text, but it does have a little bit more to it. We actually see some layout here. It's not just a list of links, but we've got some nice, large, thin, clean text here on a colored background. A lot of people, when they think of minimalist design, they think of black or gray text on a white background, and it doesn't have to be that way. Just because we're going for a minimal design doesn't mean we have to throw a white background on it. A white background does help a site to look nice and clean, but that doesn't mean it's the only background color we can use. So again, as we scroll through this, we see different sizes of text here, which really help to move your eye across the page, which really help to bring attention to certain parts of the content. But as we scroll through, we can see that most of this is really text heavy, and we have one image down here towards the bottom, or towards the middle, I guess, of the person in question. We have a couple of icons on the left, and then a Twitter icon over here. But for the most part, this is a very text-heavy site. There's very little else to it. So it's a nice combination of text, white space or negative space, which is the space in between items, and a simple use of color. Notice that there's only a couple of colors used here. We have white text on a darker background, and then we have our links, which are a different shade of that background color. Also notice that there are two main fonts that are being used here. There's this nice clean sans serif font, as well as a serif font that's being used for some of our links, but that serif font, as you'll see, is only used here and there throughout the site. So there's not a whole lot of variation in here. There's just a couple of fonts, a couple of colors, and it's a nice clean site design. The next site we're going to look at does have a bright white background, but this again is a very minimalist site. As you can see right away, there's a lot of white space in this site, but it does use some bold colors to really help the site stand out and to really make it look nice. So these bold colors really do help it stand out. And as you can see, we just have a whole section of the page, which is just a bunch of colored boxes here with the people who work for this particular web design team. So it has their Twitter handles and things like that, but it's a very simple design. And as we scroll down, we do see the use of some graphics here. We have some nice little icons representing computers and tablets and iPhones and things like that. But again, this is a very text-heavy site, and it looks really nice. And the final example I want to look at is one that's a little heavier on images. Just because it's a minimalist site doesn't mean there aren't any images on it, and we are going to use some images in our own design as we move forward in the course. This particular site is a portfolio site for a designer, so he naturally wants to be able to show off some images of his work. So this site relies heavily on the use of images, but it's all laid out in a very clean, simple way. There's not a lot of visual clutter. It's just a grid of examples of his work. So it's a very minimalist design, and the menu up here in the top right is just a couple of simple text links, and the rest of it is just examples of his work with a few ways you can get in touch with him via social media down here at the bottom. So again, as we've seen and as we've talked about, minimalist design really focuses on bringing your attention to the content of your site so that your users know as soon as they get there what the site's about and whether this is a site they want to spend more time at. So as we move forward with the rest of our series, we're going to be creating our own minimalist design using some of the guidelines that we've talked about here. And as you'll probably hear me say again, anything that we talk about in this series, it's not a set of hard and fast rules for how to create a minimalist design. It's really a bunch of guidelines on how to draw your users' attention to your content while creating a nice, pleasing, clean design for them to look at. So thank you for watching, and in the next video, we'll get started creating our own minimalist design in Photoshop.